How does one sum up in a half-hour show the fantastic accomplishments, insights, ideology, philosophy, spiritual beliefs, and life story of a very complex, eccentric, media mogul maverick from Newfoundland? You don't. Of course I'm talking about Geoff Stirling, and I am a grandson of his who bears this same name. Geoff Stirling, Ode to Newfoundland, is a presentation of a real-life Captain Newfoundland superhero. Poppy, as I used to call him, would often refer to himself as a channel. His initials, GWS, stand for Geoffrey William Stirling. He preferred to think of his initials as standing for God's willing servant. Geoff loved Newfoundland and Newfoundlanders alike. An ode is an irregular or varied poem or song, and Geoff Stirling's life was like an ode to the Isle of Newfoundland. You're about to watch some archive footage of GWS spliced together as a love story to Newfoundland. It is my honor that I present to you Geoff Stirling, Ode to Newfoundland.
If you're going to compete in the free enterprise field, then you can't destroy the free enterprise.
Well, you know, I'm a Newfoundlander, and I know that unless you're maybe born in Newfoundland.
Geoff Stirling drops by to say yes.
Ooh, what a lucky man he was.
I'm talking to 350,000 Newfoundlanders right now who understand exactly what I'm saying.
Ooh, what a lucky man he was.
The free enterprise system, and we stopped the closet socialists.
Geoff Stirling, Ode to Newfoundland.
First company I started was Newfoundland Herald. That was 33 years ago.
When I started the Herald, I had an office. I didn't even have a window in the office for the first 2 years, because that was the key years. They didn't buy the Herald, and we didn't have enough total interest in it for all different ages. For example, we've had covers on the Herald that cost $12,000 of pure art.
But that's the key company, because that one, if it hadn't worked, nothing could have worked. That's why the Newfoundland Herald owns everything. The building up there's all the land, everything's owned by the Newfoundland Herald.
Well, that's my philosophy. The good Lord has put me here. He said, look, Geoff, have a blast. It's an interesting planet. And see what you can do and use your talents as the best of your ability and concentrate on doing something like the Herald. And that's why this week's Herald now doing that Secret of Secrets, a book bonus. It's tremendous information that. Well, we're doing it. We did the Dead Sea Scrolls. We did the Galan's the Prophet. We did autobiography of Yogi Yogananda, and you know we're exposing hundreds of thousands of people. They may just read it and not understand it, but we're exposing, and the same in late night television, which we don't get any credit for. But that's the philosophy: is leave the world a little better. The same philosophy I think the Lions Club, the Rotary Club, everybody. If you leave it a little better, it's like better you got to put up a painting or something.
So when I went to India, I really went there with an open mind, because I thought there has to be new things that I haven't discovered yet. I've discovered the basic things in the Western world, but there's an awful lot of things that I don't know that I think I can discover in another continent, another world. And if I hadn't stayed in India long enough the first time, I would have came back without finding it, because my first reaction at the end of 2 months was to leave. But I stayed there long enough, and that was the breakthrough. And the second month or the third month, I started to see, or they allowed me to see, things happen, where I saw men performing what by our rational mind is miracles.
When I first came back from India, I had a funny experience. I could just read the minds, because your mind forms are outside you.
You are one of the most energetic Newfoundlanders of the last quarter of a century. Tremendously energetic, tremendous drive, energy, and ambition. I remember when you started the Sunday Herald. I remember telling you that, Geoff, I don't think it has any future. Do you remember that?
Restaurant, yeah.
Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm. First time we met, as a matter of fact.
You had a positive genius for putting out a paper, and you started a radio station called CJON. And you started the first TV station in Newfoundland, and then you started radio stations and TV stations outside Newfoundland, and you piled up a raft of money.
So there is a kind of age, certain period, that after 18, 19, 20 years, man inside awakens. The spirit awakens at what to do. And at that time, if information is not given, that now you have to get into thinking process, and all the time energy is going down and down. There is no point where he can reverse the whole system unless he does that headstand deliberately.
In other words, when they speak in terms of, I feel drained of energy, it's literally true.
Yeah.
That the energy drains down out of you into the planet, and that by reversing ourselves with headstands, we break the gravitational pull and drain the energy back into the higher parts of the body, into the head and into the thinking part.
That is very, very proper.
If you're inarticulate and can't express yourself, if you fail to be able to formulate a thought and project it, is a very difficult handicap. And many of us are shy. I think Newfoundlanders are very shy people, modest people, but yet we don't really spend a lot of time. And one of the great problems we have in communications, in finding people to be in front of the cameras or be behind the mics, is finding people who can communicate, who can really project their voice, who can articulate what they have to say if it's a news item. And it's strange that it's so difficult when we audition maybe 100 people or 50 people to find even one or two. In talking about communications, we first brought 24-hour AM radio in 1950. And then in 1977 we bought full stereo from coast to coast with Oz. And in 1955 we brought the first television. In 1964 we brought the first color television. And in 1972 we brought the first 24-hour television in the world. You've heard what has to be said. Any questions?
What would you say has been one of its major achievement? Or?
Well, I think the major achievement in Newfoundland would be you're sitting there in some isolated place, in Fogo Island or Swillingate or somewhere, and you're just as much at home as if you're in an apartment in New York or Montreal or Toronto. Mm-hmm. Hockey, football, the latest soap operas. You're not years behind the culture. You're not isolated from it, where you therefore have to seek it out and go to Montreal or go to Toronto or go there. You can have your own lifestyle and be plugged into television and now stereophonic music and FM, and what we can do is cutting the screen like 4 ways and 4 different shows, and there's such an unlimited field. We haven't really scratched the surface in television, because you can always have one screen educational, one screen inspiring kind of, one screen totally cartoons, one screen heavy information, heavy inputting, specialized inputting which you plug into a computer to bring in whatever you're into today. And we speed up tremendously the inputting that we're capable of, and therefore maximize and eliminate all this nonsense about problems.
But do you think any of your experiments have affected the opinions people have of the station?
Oh, of course, because first of all, they didn't understand they were experiments. I always kept in mind the people I was never contacting, the artist who was somewhere out there in Newfoundland, and I could have done it in closed circuit. All those consciousness who were at the machines. Now we were dealing in color experimentations, first of all, to see what we could do with color, and putting behind it always a very straight progressive music trip or whatever it was, but if you'd close your eyes, you wouldn't have been freaked out. It was or Churchill's speeches or Kennedy's speeches, and interlocked, heavy inputting. Find out what we could do. Now, by doing it openly, even at 4 o'clock in the morning, laid me open to nothing but ridicule. What's she doing now? In a country where they get that anyway. You know, but I couldn't care less. Who am I paying in the hands to? Who are they that have this great critical proclaim about anything? They don't know what they're talking about. Consciousness is the only criterion, and we are now proving what we were doing. It's like people talking about gold. I tried to explain that to people 10 years ago. They still don't understand today. I mean, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. If you're sitting there like the guys who burnt down my house must have been, saying, you got no right to be here. We own this land. Oh, sure, we all own the land. You're absolutely right. God has put us all in. We're all, that's right, we all own the land. I agree. But if we can't buy some land or have some private property, then right the minute of this interview, the door can burst open and anybody who wants to can come in here and crowd around here and start laughing and shouting and making a mess of the place, and we can't do a thing.
Do you think that's because of the mentality of the populace?
Oh, sure. If we were all total saints And our life was based nothing but service. And my only motivation now was, how can I serve you? The Indian, you know. Well, if you're in your motivation, how can I serve you? Well, we've reached the utopia and we're both enlightened. I'll accept the fact that you're Jesus Christ and you accept the fact that I am and everybody else is. And now we're here in love and we're going to be on this planet. We're immortal if you want to have the disciplines. And what are we going to do with it? Sure, it'll work. Of course, it has to. That's the ultimate.
Here's my question, Geoff Stirling. Are you just a money maker, a money machine? Are you just a money grabber? Are you just a grab-all, a greedy grab-all for money?
Joey Smallwood, former Premier of Newfoundland and the main force who brought the Dominion of Newfoundland into the Canadian Confederation, asks a simple yet poignant question. Was Geoff Stirling greedy and only interested in making money? They had an interesting relationship, Geoff and Joey. Once political rivals, they became great friends who had a mutual respect for one another, including their differences in point of view. I personally think that Geoff Stirling, although very successful in accumulating material wealth, did a lot to lift the consciousness and confidence of Newfoundlanders. With his late-night chats, he brought new ways of thinking to people isolated on an island. He thought Newfoundlanders were good people, the best kind, in fact. He encouraged us to take care of ourselves, our bodies, our minds, and even our spirits, and to think outside the box.
You see me as a businessman and a person who reads balance sheets and so on. I'm all those things, but I'm also somebody who's not caught up with having the illusion that just accumulating money is the game.
I get great fun kidding you about all the money you've made, you know. But I know you too well. That's not what life means to you. Your grandfather was a priest, an Anglican priest, a Church of England minister, Church of England clergyman. Your uncle taught divinity in Bishop Hill College where I was. He taught me and he taught us music. Herbert W. Stirling. So here you are, you come from a family of religious people, of religious men. Now, you could have studied theology and been ordained a minister of the Church of England, but you didn't. You went to university, I believe, down in Florida, was it? University, you were an athlete, probably a jumper or a runner.
High jumper.
High jumper. Okay, so you're a university man and an athlete, and you started a newspaper called the Sunday Herald.
I guess the most important thing about starting your own business or making up your mind you're going to try to work for yourselves rather than somebody else is confidence. And that's why it's important to hang out with other people who have confidence.
Oh, of course, but the most talented of men must get their opportunity.
But Joseph, all you are is God's instrument to give him the instrument.
Okay.
That's all you are.
Yes, I have no doubt of that.
Huh?
I have no doubt of
But
that.
do you, Anna, don't you think that that's the way God works? If I have given a lot of people their start by being an instrument.
Let's shorten it by just blaming God, huh?
We're not blaming anybody. We're simply saying that God works through us. How else does he work? How else does he work?
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that the way it is?
Oh, that's right.
But I mean, seriously. I mean, we're in a very short period of time, Joseph, we show this film, maybe both of us will be dead. Now, what are we? Where are we? Just in some dark clay somewhere? We, in the course of the conversations we've been having with ex-Premier Smallwood, have been talking about many things. And we've been talking about them as frankly as I feel that they should be talked about. I think it's about time that television opened itself up to hearing the truth for a change. I think that one of the great concerns right now is that many things are being said that are not being said completely in many levels. Now listen, Joseph, and all do know Joseph's name, the father of Jesus, is a pretty profound name.
Yeah.
And can you imagine when we glorify material advantages or material gains that are godless, we are doing a very strange thing to ourselves. Well, 17 years ago, I had been in Cuba doing a underwater film, which I'll someday show on this station.
You fly so high, I get a strange magic Oh, what a strange magic. Oh, it's a strange magic. Got it? Strange magic. Got it? Strange magic.
That I got you your license, but your
You've
own
said it
hard
11
work.
times now.
Yes, no, but the first time I said it, when you bawled at me, you see how patient I am.
You're very patient, I must admit. I felt that on in Cuba.
I said,
But
I got you your license,
But I think that any
but you
man...
did the hard work.
I think...
What I claim is
That's what that impression we're
that
getting.
I got your first radio license from you, and from that, you, by your own hard work, killed it up into a big fortune.
By my own hard work. Well, I guess as long as you live in this reincarnation, you're going to try to take the credit for our success.
No, I take the credit I hadn't got you your first license.
Well, I say to you that...
And everything followed from that.
That is nonsense.
With a lot of hard work,
everything followed from the Newfoundland Herald.
A lot of ability, yes.
The first thing is that...
It all followed from your birth.
The first
It all followed from you being born.
I know that we're born
and
in
then
hell.
it was followed from your going to school, and it followed from this, that, and the other. But all that happened would have amounted to nothing if I hadn't got the license for you. You wouldn't have had a radio.
Ladies and gentlemen, so that if Mr. Smallwood or anybody else wants to take credit for those men, that's his problem. All I say to you is God has created us here. I'm thankful to him. I think I'm very thankful that I was born into a fine religious family who don't try to take credit away from God in any way, shape, or form, that I take no credit for any man's own efforts. I salute every man, including yourself, in the great battle you did to have and bring about Confederation. I don't agree with your ideology on many, many points, and that's why last August I said before a man dies, he reevaluates the friendships he has, and he looks over and sees where there's a possibility before the eyes close of all the people involved. They can solve any disagreements, or at least have not.
Well, I was trying to make friends again.
No, I don't want to make friends with you, for God's sake, man. I don't want to sit here and insult you. What do you think is so great about being friends with Joe Smallwood? I say that a man starts when he makes his first successful business, and when he establishes enough money, because I have a great respect for Premier Smallwood and all his accomplishments in this country. I have never want to be negative. He has great patience, he certainly has, and he has great talent, and I salute him for it. But I don't want ever to be beholden to any man. I don't in any way, shape, or form want to do anything to take away from any man's reputation, or to say that there but the grace of God, he wouldn't have made it without me. Well, that isn't the way I operate. Nobody owes me anything, and as long as I'm articulate and as long as I'm able, I will defend any man from being attacked and put down by any other man. And he'll certainly have the use of these cameras to do it. Because once a thing is said, it goes across the country from coast to coast, and all they do is laugh at us Newfoundlanders, who destroy each other with our innuendos and our rumors and our viciousness and our negativity. We tear each other down. But I don't intend to say anything negative about any man, not in my lifetime, if I can ever possibly have enough consciousness not to get caught in that negative state. We're going to be constantly reminded we were nothing but the temple of the living soul. And that soul wasn't to be destroyed by other men. That soul was to be expanded and to be inspired.
You may have received some insight into the life of Geoff Stirling. What I especially find fascinating about the man, the myth, the legend, was his belief in the Sunday Herald. Leading up to May 12, 1946, when the Sunday Herald debuted, a question enters my consciousness. What inspired Geoff? Stirling invested everything he had into the company, even against the judgment of Joey Smallwood. Geoff had a vision and a belief that the tabloid was going to work, and this actually came to pass. What about Jeffrey William Stirling's initials? To illustrate his philosophy that his initials stood for God's willing servant, the internationally best-selling story Jonathan Livingston Seagull comes to mind. Geoff loved this book and how the author Richard Bach wrote the story. Basically, Bach heard a voice that literally dictated the story to him. Similarly, Geoff always believed in something bigger than himself, helping to navigate his life. Jonathan Livingston Seagull is the story's main character, who is a seagull that does not follow the flock. Rather, he spends his time harnessing his skills at flying. Jonathan did not see the value in fighting over scraps of food like the other seagulls. Geoff Stirling believed that this story is a parable for our life's goals, dreams, and ambitions, as well as an analogy for North America's free enterprise system. Geoff utilized this book and the concepts of this book to promote entrepreneurial ideas that have benefited the lives of generations of Newfoundlanders. I can relate to these ideals because who wants to slave away at a dreadful job? If you can create your own career on the terms you dreamed up, how cool is that?
Your grandfather had somewhat of an impact on me, because I knew him and I knew Geoff Stirling. I knew he was an entrepreneur. I knew he ran NTV and that type of stuff. And I remember as a student watching his Jonathan Livingston Seagull show that he would roll, which my mother thought was crazy, of course, but I didn't.
This is overnight, classic Geoff Stirling late night programming.
It's like that people would say, why is he putting that on? But I guess he was putting it on to get to someone like me, okay? That he felt that there was something that he had learned and he had created business and he had created this remarkable organization, and that somehow there was a message there that had got to him somehow because he did this, and that maybe he should pass that message on. And so I had never read that book before, and then so I was watching this Jonathan Seagull, Newfoundland full of seagulls, and I said, what is this about? So then I read the book and I said, oh, so I get it. It's about a seagull who wants to be different, about a seagull who's willing to take a risk, about a seagull who wants to do something different with its life. And that had a remarkable effect on me because somehow I was there. I knew, yes, I wanted to do something different.
We need that to unfold in front of our eyes, and I think it's happening. But by being positive, by taking stands, by not being afraid to be countered, by taking on the socialists, as Shakespeare said, taking arms against the sea of trouble and by opposing end it. Well, let's end it, and let's get on with it, and let's all fly together. Thank you very much.
We're living in an illusion. I mean, all this thing, the suggestion you do about doing this or that is nonsense. Well, it's like us welcoming Cabot, whose son then became a slave trader and came back and took slaves. And the Beothics were here for thousands of years, and I haven't found anybody yet who says, Geoff, where do the Beothics come from? Could they possibly have been, with the sinking of Atlantis, descendants of Atlantis? Or Lemuria, but because we have agreed with Darwin's theory of evolution that you've accepted the premise you came out of the trees, once you accept the premise that you came from apes, as Darwin's theory is, you've got to ask yourself, why is there still apes? But we haven't found the missing link. Where did we come from? Could we have come on explorations from outer space? And like they took the prisoners to Australia, could we have been, is this why our deals are so bad? That we have put the less than high quality brain systems into this colony to try it out, and other planets have brought some of their people, and 10,000 years ago, somewhere in the bureaucracy, they lost the fact that they had people out in the outer ranges of outer space. So here we are trying to figure out what happens of this huge continent, which is the 10th largest continent, Newfoundland. Smallwood promised me that we would have a sovereign zone around Newfoundland as an island. We're not Saskatchewan, we're not Alberta, because what's happening in Canada is really outrageous. I mean, what they're doing to Newfoundland. I mean, it was never the dream of Smallwood. Smallwood would take us out of Confederation if he could. He said that to me in the last year. He said, I think I made a mistake, Geoff. I said, it's a little late, Joe. It's like a marriage.
And Premier Smallwood went into a recording booth and recorded all the questions that he wanted to ask Fidel, and they were then translated into Spanish, and so were mine. Fidel simply wasn't willing to answer the kind of questions we wanted to get at, which was, where does it end? If work for work's sake is man's only potential aim, where is the potential utopia that we're all seeking? If you're going to spend your rest of your life from 9 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock at night and burn up your energy doing jobs that can be done better by machines, and then recuperating your energy on the weekend so you can go back again, put you in your little box, what is it all about? Without the spiritual base to man's life, without a belief that man has to aim towards perfection, to try to improve and broaden his consciousness and raise his expectations to a higher level than we've ever seen on this little planet, really what is it all about? Now, the Premier and myself obviously had very heavy disagreements on this philosophical point, and yet I understand what he's saying. I have tremendous respect for Premier Smallwood.
Mr. Smallwood, how are you, sir?
I'm fine, sir.
You look fine looking at your paper, sir.
Yes.
How are you, Mr. Stirling?
Very well, thank you.
What are you people trying to prove by what you're showing us little Newfoundlanders here tonight?
What are we trying to prove or fool?
Well, you can say it how you like. What are we supposed to accept from what you're showing us tonight?
Well, you're seeing actually 1 hour of 20 hours of film that we did throughout Cuba. And all we're showing you is a film that was made by the National Film Board as a result of a trip we went down there to do an interview with Fidel Castro. So that's what we're showing you.
You're showing us a film that you tried to produce with Castro, but we didn't see anything but you didn't even see the man.
Well, you saw him in his parade and you saw him at the ending because the film is called Waiting for Fidel. And if you've seen this show from the beginning, you'll have heard that when we submitted the questions, although there's an argument here that why we didn't see him, but my opinion is he didn't want to answer the questions. Mr. Premier's, the ex-Premier's opinion is that he simply was too busy after 17 years of running back and forth the island.
Yeah, I can see in the background right now somebody serving a cup of coffee to Mr. Smallwood.
That's right.
But,
where's the coffee?
With us Newfoundlanders.
Yeah.
Let's face it, we're all Newfoundlanders. You made your goal here in Newfoundland.
Well, we're just a minute now. We're not all Newfoundlanders. This film is going to be seen in a great many other places besides Newfoundland.
Right. But we're talking Newfoundland now. It's showing you Newfoundland at this particular moment, right?
Yes.
And you're telling Newfoundland people that you and Mr. Smallwood went out to Cuba.
Did you see this program from the beginning?
Part of it.
Well, don't confirm the Newfoundland jokes.
And the Newfies. Stupid Newfies. I'm a Newfie. Whee!
This is why I feel so passionate about it, I guess.
How much of an illusion do we have before we wake up? Newfoundlanders are not stupid. Stupidity is intellectual arrogance. When you're sure that you're right, you don't learn anything. That's what stupidity is. Newfoundlanders are the last stupid people in the world, man. They're the brightest, the gentlest, but they're very naive.
I felt we had to go 24 hours. We couldn't have developed Captain Newfoundland and Captain Atlantis and Captain Freedom and Captain Canada, which we have developed, and we're now into the stage of taking it to animation and movies. Because Canada doesn't have anything else but a flag to represent it. It doesn't have Superman, it doesn't have Davy Crockett, it doesn't have all of the mythology that the United States has. So you have to develop. You have to get out of the cynicism that Newfoundlanders have.
It's not much fun to make a success of yourself and then have nobody to share it with. It's not much fun to not have a loving eyes and a loving smile and a loving being who's the other side of our entity in this partnership as we go through life together as partners and true partners with our wives. And therefore, I'd like to take this occasion to say a happy 21st anniversary to my wife, who, sitting next to the ex-premier of this province,
How does one sum up in a half-hour show the fantastic accomplishments and life story of a very complex, eccentric, media mogul maverick from Newfoundland? You don't.
But in 5 years from now, will the news be as thorough as it once was?
Well, you know, who can project in the fastest moving time in history, really, the energy that's coming in here? That 5 years is like a millennium. It's hard to say because it becomes so self-evident that if you control the national news, it's much more powerful than being president.